Hi, I'm Julia Hamm, President and CEO of the Smart Electric Power Alliance. And in this episode of SEPA TV, I'm talking with Mark Gabriel, Administrator and CEO of the Western Area Power Administration. This discussion is part of a series of conversations exploring the role of various technologies in our journey towards a carbon-free energy system. Mark, thanks so much for joining me. You know, hydropower has been at the heart of the WAPA system for a very long time. How is WAPA leveraging hydro as a catalyst for further reducing carbon within our energy system?
Well, you know, the good news from a WAPA perspective, and actually from the entire Western United States, is we've got 57 dams, 10,000 megawatts of clean, renewable hydropower. And as we saw just recently in the situation in California, we were able to deploy that hydropower when there was a challenge with grid operations. Fortunately, for us, we had that resource. We were able to manage things a little bit differently than normal in terms of running water through the dams. I think most importantly, the value of hydropower comes both in helping to build a low carbon and no carbon future, but also in critical issues around grid resilience, grid reliability, and really balancing the needs of a system that is changing radically as we add more distributed resources, as baseload generation goes offline. Hydropower is a solid backbone, and it's something that I believe is going to be critical for us to be successful in getting to that low carbon future.
Yeah, so let's dig deeper on some of those other values you just started to talk about, right? I mean, obviously, as utilities are thinking about their resource mix, geography plays an important role, right? If you're in some place that's really sunny, you can really leverage solar. In a windy place, wind, water and dams, hydro. But other than geographic considerations, what are some of the other factors that you really have to be thinking about as you're evaluating what your long-term energy mix is going to look like, again, through this lens of reducing carbon?
Sure. I mean, there's two components in the system that we run, right? We run energy and we have capacity. And capacity is really that backbone that we can count on every single day to be there. So for example, when the sun goes down and if the wind doesn't come up, there's a gap. And filling that gap in the future may come from batteries, but of course, battery storage is still in its infancy, both in terms of technology and cost. So you need something like hydropower to provide a backbone. I always think about it as, in this world, you can carry a lot of information on a memory stick, but at the end of the day, you need to plug that into a hard drive that makes sure that that information flows. Electrons are exactly the same way. We can add more and more renewables, which I think is critical, but we also have to have some backbone, right? So when the sun doesn't shine or the wind dips and the vagaries of just operating a big grid, you've got to have something there that's solid. And until we quite candidly recognize that, I think in finance, we still have to keep arguing about it in physics. And I will tell you, physics beats philosophy every single time.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you're faced with as you look to further deploy hydro as part of this energy mix going forward?
Well, think about it this way. Only 3% of the 90,000 dams in the United States have power capability, just 3%. Mm-hmm. Now, we're fortunate to have 57, including some big ones like Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam. But as we think about a future where more renewables come online, and more baseload generation goes offline, whether that's natural gas, coal, or nuclear, we have to figure out what the right balance is. And of course, operating hydro is not just about electricity. In fact, that's just one of the 8 uses of most dams. We've got to think about water, flood, recreation, what it means to wildlife. So there's always a balance that we have to achieve. And quite frankly, most of these dams were built decades ago, and we contract for them thinking about the way the world was as opposed to the way the world's going to be. And that's one of the discussions we're having regularly with our 700 customers, mostly utilities, munis, co-ops, military bases, Native American tribes, as to how is this world going to change and what do we need to do to be prepared so that hydropower can remain a backbone, maybe even grow over time, and yet also continue to provide that low carbon resource, no carbon resource that really will allow the grid to operate in this new future.
So without going too much into the weeds, when you talk about contracting, what are some of the high level changes to how those resources are being contracted for that need to happen?
Well, keep in mind, we have 10 different river systems and 15 different rate setting mechanisms, plus 17,000 miles of transmission. So historically, we've contracted for a set amount of power to a set customer. And when we generate from the dams, they get that power. When we don't generate from the dams, we buy on the market. Every year, WAPA buys somewhere between $300 million and $800 million a year to make up for when hydro is not available. We're going to have to think in the future to say it might be more valuable to hold back the hydropower till the peak times, right, which is always 5 to 8 o'clock at night, and buy power on the market. So that's a change in thinking from getting a guaranteed quantity to getting quantity at the right time. And I think actually it's going to allow us to continue where we are today, which is the lowest price commodity in every market that we serve.
Yeah, so you mentioned that that's one change in thinking that needs to happen. You know, as we go through this energy transition, I think there are a lot of changes in thinking. And so I'm curious to hear from you as a leader of WAPA, which is a relatively large organization. You have not only a lot of employees, but you have a lot of customers, as you've already described, that you serve, a lot of stakeholders who are impacted by your business. What are some of the key things you're thinking about in terms of ensuring that there's alignment with your employees, your customers, your stakeholders, and the vision that you have for the future?
Yeah, it's a tremendous question. So back about 7 years ago, we created our strategic roadmap 2024 to understand what the major issues were and how would we succeed out into this new future. And a big piece of that is collaboration. WAPA is really one of the most collaborative organizations I've ever worked for. And keep in mind, I came from the Electric Power Research Institute, where we did lots of collaboration, particularly around technology. I think we have to come up with a joint understanding of what does that future look like. So for example, if we all want a carbon-free future, and I don't hear anybody arguing against that, what is it going to take to get there? How do we have to think about technology, for example? We've been exploring with our great partners at the Bureau of Reclamation the possibility of putting a large-scale battery at one of the dams. So you might ask, well, why would you do that? Well, you would do it because there's times I have to run the dams to meet environmental regulations, keep the water flowing, keep the fish healthy, right? So there are times when I could be generating electricity and not putting them out into a market which has too many electrons at the moment, but rather put them in some storage. So what does that require? It requires partnering with our great generating agencies, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Corps of Engineers, and the International Boundary Waters Commission. It requires partnering with our friends in the environmental community and with all of our customers. Again, I think we're going to all come to a different thought of how this grid is going to operate. And so we've got to, we can't argue that it's not happening. We see it every day. So rather than do that, I think it's a key role that WAPA plays with great support from its customers to help envision that future. Because as I remind our folks, whether it's our smallest customer, which has 300 meters at the end, or our biggest customers like SMUD, we've got to we're all dealing with the same vision for the future, and how we get there has got to be done collaboratively.
Great. Well, as you know, that's how SEPA operates as well. So I love to hear that from you as well. To wrap up, Mark, what one piece of advice would you give to any utility executive who is really digging deep right now to make decisions about the future of their energy mix?
I think first is to let go of the past. You have to let go of the thought that we are stuck in one paradigm. So I always tell my fellow executives, and we do discuss this a lot, okay, if we were to draw a clean slate, what would that look like? And what is it going to take to get there? And I always tell them, don't forget physics, right? Because physics beats philosophy every time. And we have to make sure that we understand what we want to achieve and then how do we achieve it, and make sure those two things meet from a technical standpoint as well as a philosophical one.
Great advice, Mark. A great note to end on. Thank you so much for your time, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership in the industry and your leadership at WAPA. And stay safe out there.
All right, thank you. You too. Wear your mask.
Thanks for watching. To see other interviews in this series, as well as other series that we've run on SEPA TV, please visit our website at sepapower.org/SEPA TV or visit our YouTube channel.